Okay, while it's taking me literally all day to get the motivation to film this video, I finally have the camera set up and it's time to go. So it's been a bit of an interesting week. I've had a couple of conversations that I thought were really insightful that kind of just had my mind going throughout the week. And there's just a couple things that I wanted to talk about just in general that I either found interesting or just things that I did. So without further ado, I had a conversation with another developer last weekend, which by the time you guys see this video, that won't really have any reference, but I went and talked to another developer, just someone that I met through an acquaintance. But basically at the end of our conversation, I asked him kind of like, does he have any advice for me when it comes to, learning programming and what the future of this industry is going to look like? And essentially what he told me was this: understand the fundamentals of programming on a deep level, know how to read code, and then focus on using the AI tools to build projects. And if you want to stand out as a developer, just being good at coding isn't going to be enough anymore. You need to have interpersonal skills, communication skills, and understand business logic. Those will be some of the highest leverage skills for future programmers to understand. And just to kind of wrap up this topic, I got an interesting comment on one of my TikTok videos the other day. It was a senior engineer basically talking about how he's been using AI coding for the last 2 years straight and how he doesn't code anymore at all. But what he did say, which I found super interesting, was that understanding code, design patterns, architectural patterns, requirements, spec files, and QA has never been more important. It's cool that there are others out there who are obviously working within the industry that are seeing where it's going and where things are moving, and they're giving people like me advice for what you should be doing and focusing on. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Anyways, so the next thing I want to talk about was this new book I started, which is called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. It is by Robert B. Cialdini? Hope I said that right. But the reason I want to talk about this book is because it kind of has a lot to do with not just psychology, but also a lot to do with like mindset in general and just kind of also how to just deal with people in everyday life. But basically the start of the book talks about how as animals, so not just us, but all of the animals out in the world, we all have kind of like instinctual triggers that depending on specific circumstances can just kind of set them off. And then all of a sudden, it's not like brainwashing, but we're programmed in our brains to act a certain way when specific things happen. And so one of the examples it used in the book was, there's this specific type of female firefly, am I getting this right? That its goal is to eat and kill the male fireflies. And the way that it does that is by basically pretending that it wants to mate. It basically attracts these males, and because of the male's programming in their brain, when they see this female doing its mating ritual, they can't help but go to the female firefly, and then the female firefly gets what it wants and it eats and kills them. And these triggers can be exploited by other people for them to get what they want, or on the flip side, if you know how to enact these triggers in other people, you can kind of manipulate them and get what you want, which is, I know it sounds kind of scary and kind of sounds malicious, but it's still interesting and good to know because it just lets you kind of take a perspective and look back and think about all the little tiny things that potentially someone might know and then can use against you in the future. Kind of a bad way of explaining it. I feel like I missed a lot of the deeper meaning there. But the other example that the book used, which is probably a better example when it comes to actually people, is that this ideology of expensive is better. And so a lot of us are told from a young age that the more expensive something is, the better quality it's going to be, the better product you're going to get if it's more expensive, right? And so there's this thought that expensive is better. And so the example that it used in the book was basically there was this lady who owned a gas station and she was trying to sell like these little rocks, of, I think they were just, whatever. I can't remember what the rocks were, but basically what happened is she kept trying all these different techniques and different processes to try and get people to buy these rocks. So she would, put them in front of the store, put them right into the aisle where people were buying their products or going to purchase for their stuff. And what happened was no one was buying them. No one was buying these rocks and she couldn't understand why. So one day she asked one of her employees to basically mark them down as half off. But the employee misread the text and put them as 2 times the price that they were originally being sold for. And all of a sudden, they started selling like crazy because people that were coming in, tourists, and I guess this was a gas station that was very tourist heavy during the summer. And so basically what happened is tourists would come in during the summertime and see these rocks that were now, 2 times more expensive than they used to be. And they would assume that because it was expensive, that it was good. And so they just bought a bunch of them because without having any prior knowledge of whether this was actually some sort of gem that had any sort of value, they just bought it because they saw that it had an expensive price tag. And so you can use that same logic to get people to buy something from you by basically being like, if it's expensive, it's good. It's just interesting because it plays on human psychology and the fact that you can mess with people or you can get what you want from people by playing on these triggers that we psychologically have ingrained in us. And then the most recent chapter I read is talking about this rule of reciprocation. And it's basically a rule that's talking about gifts. and how when someone gives you a gift or does a favor for you, there's this psychological, you feel like you're indebted to them. Even if they say like, don't worry about it, there is this little thing in the back of your head that's always gonna make you feel like you owe them a favor in the future, or you feel like you need to repay them back sooner than later, so that you don't have this mental way on your brain of like, oh fuck, I owe this person something because they did something for me. And that's why even like, I think in the Bible it talks about this, but essentially you want to be careful who you receive gifts from, because you don't know what their intentions are later in the future or at the time of giving the gift, right? And because there's a lot of people who've been, even my girlfriend gave me a good example of this, is that she had a friend, and this friend gave her a camera. It was like, oh, I don't use it anymore, it's kind of broken or whatever, you can just have it. And then a couple months went down the line, and this friend found out that my girlfriend had like a fair amount of money or whatever you want to call a fair amount of money, but she had some money in her bank account. Like, this is when they were like kids, so like whatever that means back then. And when this friend who gifted her this camera for free found out that she had money, she was like, oh yeah, that camera I gave you, $200, I want $200 for it. So people in the moment might not seem like they're malicious or ill-intended when they give you a gift, but in the future they might come back and say, hey, remember that time? And I'm sure we've all felt this before, where it's like someone went out and did something for you without any intentions of getting anything in return, and then a couple months down the line they come back and go, hey, remember that thing I did for you? So it's good to be aware of the people that are gifting you things, because you don't necessarily know what their intentions are down the line. So it's just something good to be aware of. I know this has been a pretty yap heavy video, so after this last discussion topic, I'll let you go. But the last thing that I wanted to talk about is how discipline beats motivation, especially when it comes to consistency. Because here's the thing, like when you're just starting out anything, like let's say social media, for example, when you're first starting out, the results that you're going to be getting back on a daily basis are going to be super, super small. And so it's hard to stay motivated, which is why discipline is more important than motivation, because discipline is what allows you to show up every single day, no matter what the results are. Like the main thing you should be focusing on, whether it's you want to grow on social media, you want to get bigger at the gym, or you want to learn a new skill. If those are things that you actually want to succeed in doing, the most important thing that you can do is setting a specific goal and then reverse engineering the steps that it takes to get there, and only focusing on those steps every single day, because eventually you will reach your goal. It's just going to become a byproduct of the things that you're doing every single day to get there. And I know it's super cliche to say it, but like fall in love with the process, because for me, like I have these goals, which here I'll show you right now. These are the goals that I want to accomplish by 2026. And will it happen? I don't know, but I know that I have specific steps to take every single day to get me 1% closer to those goals every single day. And I'm more in love with knocking off my checklist items than I am with necessarily getting to these goals, which of course, do I want to reach them and will I one day achieve all those goals? I 100% will. But it's the showing up every single day and having the discipline that becomes the addiction once you get going. And there's this principle from Atomic Habits that I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's basically like the days in a row principle. And essentially what happens is when you start a new habit, at first it seems really hard and difficult, and it seems hard to just stay consistent at it. But once you get, like, let's say like your goal is to just go to the gym consistently. Once you've been doing it for 2 weeks in a row, if you physically mark off on your calendar each day as you go and you have 14 X's in a row, it's going to be really hard psychologically for you to want to break that streak, because you have a physical representation of how well you've been doing. So that's just another thing you can add to your arsenal of tools to just keep yourself consistent, is actually mark each day your consistency. And it's a good just reminder of how far you've come. I know this video was a lot of yapping and there's a lot of just things that I kind of went through, and I really enjoyed doing this. I feel like it was a cool way for me to kind of just express my own thoughts that I've been kind of dealing with all week. So I'm probably gonna end up doing more of these, but let me know what you guys thought in the comments, and if there's any topics that you want me to discuss in the next video, let me know.